Most of you may know me as a cash game player, but for the next few days I'm transforming into a poker tournament crusher. That's right, PokerStars invited me out to the holy grail of casino locations, Monte Carlo, for the EPT main event. I don't need to say much about what this opportunity means to me. I'm sure everyone has seen the James Bond movies and dreamt of coming out here one day, and I'm definitely no different. The main event is a €5,300 buy-in, which is the second largest of my career, and I'll have to defeat the best players in the world if I want a chance at winning the €1 million top prize. You guys are in for a treat in this vlog, as I had not one, but two filmers capturing every bet, all in, every bang sticker, and all the emotions that come along with grinding a main event. Good luck us. €5,300 gets us a 30K starting stack, and we start off at the 200, 400, 400 blind levels. I chipped up a little bit to 35K, and I find myself on the button with pocket tens. The cutoff opens it up to 800, and for those of you that are cash game players, tournaments play a little bit differently. You're going to see a lot of min raising and 2.1 and 2.2x raises, so $800 is definitely not strange. I'm going to come in for a 3-bet here with pocket tens and make it 2,000 chips, and he puts in the call. There's 5K in the middle, and the flop comes 8-8 deuce with 2 hearts. The opponent checks it over to me, and I decide to go for a 1.2K bet here. I decide to go really small because I want him to call with his ace of hearts and king of hearts high hands, and I just want to get a little bit of extra value from those. Obviously, he's going to call me with all of his pocket pairs. He does in fact put in the call, and the turn comes the 7 of hearts, giving me a flush draw. The villain now decides to take the initiative and lead out into me here for 1,800, kind of a weird spot. I think he would be doing this with all of his low flushes. Obviously his 8x might do this as well. His bluffs would be his ace and king of hearts that have no pair. I can't go anywhere with my pocket tens with a heart, which is very important to say. I put in the call, and the river comes the 5 of clubs. With 14.5K in the middle, the opponent chooses a super milky size of 3,500. I'd honestly rather him go for like a 10K bet, because then it just means a lot more bluffs are in his range. But when he goes really small, I'm putting him on an 8x, maybe a low flush, or maybe even pocket sevens. Still, I can't fold with my overpair, aka 2 pair here, 10s and 8s. I put in the call. Well, happy birthday. You'll win. Okay, thank you. And the opponent shows us an airball bluff, 10-5 offsuit with the 5 of hearts. He makes a pair in the river, goes for a little bit of thin value maybe, or maybe it was a bluff, but either way, taking in an 18K pot, which is nearly 2/3 of a starting stack, is a great start to the day. Hand number 2, we find ourselves at the same blind level, 200, 400, 400. I'm in the big blind with ace-king offsuit. The hijack opens it up to 1K, and the cutoff puts in the call. The button now goes for what looks like a squeeze and raises it up to 3.9K, and the action folds around to me. Obviously I have ace-king offsuit, so a 4-bet is incoming. However, I did mention it does seem a little bit squeezy when you see a raise and a call, and then another raise from opponent on the best position at the table, the button. So I would be doing this also here with hands like ace-5 suited, pocket sevens, pocket eights could even come in for a nice little 4-bet, but ace-king offsuit definitely gonna warrant a raise, and I make it $9,000 to go. We get rid of the hijack and the cutoff, and the action's back over to the button. Little side note, the button was my favorite player at the table. He was really one of the only players who was talking. Kind of a interesting dynamic in these tournaments, especially in Europe. There's just a lot of seriousness going on. People with headphones in, taking it super serious. I mean, it is a $5,300 buy-in, so I don't blame them, but man, it's just so different from cash games. You really have to be focused the entire time, and you really can't bounce too much conversation off of your neighbors. Still, there's no friends at the poker table, so I make a 9K raise, and the opponent on the button does in fact find the fold. He later told me he had ace-jack offsuit, so that was in fact a squeeze, and we are going to take down hand number 2. Hand number 3, we upgrade to pocket 8s now from the cutoff. I open it up to 1K, and the small blind now 3-bets me to 4,000 chips. Having a pocket pair is good, being in position is great, so I decide to put in the call, and we're going to go heads up to the flop, which comes king 6-6 rainbow. The opponent in the small blind goes for a very small sizing here of 1,500, nearly 1/6 the size of the pot. I can't go anywhere with my 2 pair 8s and 6s. I put in the call, and the turn comes a bad card, the jack of clubs. It's just a bad card because his range is going to be comprised a lot around those Broadway cards, so the King X, Jack X. I mean, now he could even have hands like Queen 10 of diamonds and go for another bet, and sure enough, into the 12K pot comes a nice sizable bet here of 6K. Even though I could call one more time in position and see what he does on the river, I decided to save my 6K chips. It's likely he would check here with hands like 10s and 9s, and then hands like Ace Queen and Ace 10. So I decided to relinquish my hand, wave the white flag, and hand number 3 going the small blind's way. Alright, there weren't that many hands that the filmers missed, but this is one of them. I looked down at Ace King offsuit from under the gun and opened it up to 1.7K. The action folds around to the small blind, who jams 18.2K in the middle. The big blind gets out of the way. Action's back over to me with Ace King offsuit. It's a snap call, and we're going off to a run out versus Ace Queen offsuit. A great spot for us to eliminate an opponent and get a lot more chips in our stack. A few hands later, we look at pocket 10s from under the gun and open it up to 1.7K again. I have 40K in my stack, and we find ourselves getting 3-bet by our direct left. Not a great spot to be in. I do have to put in the call though. Pocket 10s is too strong to fold, even though it's early positions battling against each other, and it'll be out of position the rest of the way. I put in the call, and the flop comes 7-6 deuce with 2 clubs. A check is in order. I check it over to my opponent, who goes for a 3.9K bet, and I really only have one decision here with an overpair. I put in the call once again. When the turn comes the 8 of hearts, I like this card, but I still have to check. The opponent looks at his stack, looks over at the size of the pot, and sees that he has just enough. It's right around the same size, and he rips it all in. It's an overbet shove on the turn. Now I'm in a gross spot. It's a polarizing bet. He either has a very strong hand like an overpair or a set, or he has nothing for like Ace King, Ace Queen, something like that. Still, I think pocket 10s are way too good to fold, being an overpair, and there's a bunch of draws out there, so I put in the call, and we see the bad news. It's a cooler, pocket queens versus pocket 10s. There's only one card to come. The river card is no help. It's the 8 of diamonds, so a pretty standard hand, but still one that I'd classify a cooler. Pocket queens taking down my hand, early position battle, and one that we had to have, but unfortunately we ran into the goods this time. In hand number 6, the blinds have gone up once again to 600, 1.2, 1.2. Unfortunately, I have 26K in my stack, a little bit less than a starting stack, and I look down at pocket 6s from under the gun. I decide to limp in, and the cutoff puts in the call. Action's on the big blind, who decides to take his option and check behind, leading us 3 ways to a flop, which comes about as good as you could hope for. 8-8-6, bang, we flop a boat. I'm playing in Monte Carlo, Monaco in the EPT main event, and I just flopped myself 6s full of 8s on a pretty short stack here of 26K, so life is pretty good. Obviously, I have to slow play this out of position. I start with a check. Unfortunately, the action checks through, which is not great news because I might have gone for a check raise there and started to put money in the middle. But the turn comes the ace of clubs, which is pretty good because I think it'll connect with a few of my opponents here. The question is, do I want to check and let them do the betting, or do I want to start putting the money in now? I think putting the money in now is the move. I'm also going to be doing this with hands like 7-9, 7-5. I could have hands like pocket 5s, pocket 4s that are just trying to get a 6 to fold. And I also could have some spade draws, so I'm not only going to have 6s full of 8s here. I decided to lead out into the field for 4K. We get rid of the cutoff, and my buddy in the big blind, who has been buying me green teas all day for free because he played in a super high roller and has a black bracelet on his wrist. It's a lot of information there, but basically he is a crusher. He puts in the call. In position to the river we go, which comes a 7 of diamonds. Seems like a pretty safe river to put all my chips in the middle, right? Hold on, why did I leave a red 500 chip behind? Well, for you cash game players, this is a tournament strategy where when you're going all in, you actually leave one chip behind because that one chip is worth a lot more. If you were to be bluffing here and get called, you now have a chip that has the advantage of playing the next hand and getting the big blind ante as well. So I leave one chip behind. It's a high level strategy. I don't really know what I'm doing, but I see a lot of the crushers doing it, so I did it as well. The villain in the big blind now goes into the tank for a while, ends up putting in the call, and when he sees that I have the goods, he says it was a nit roll. So I wonder what he had. Maybe like ace 10, maybe he had an 8, although I think he probably calls faster with an 8. So I'm wondering what he meant by that nit roll, but either way, taking down a massive pot here, a nearly 48K pot. And we are chipping up nicely to end the night with 70.5K. We are gonna bag day one, a huge accomplishment, playing a 5,300 main event. Tons of players at my table with 2, 3, 4 million in Hendon Mob earnings. And little old Wolfgang here bags a 70.5K stack heading into day two. Day 2 is where the tournament starts to get really fun. PokerStars realized that Wolfgang bagged a double starting stack for day 2, and they put all the media attention on me, did an interview with them, and also they put me right at the start of day 2 on the feature table, so that means you guys get some live stream hands.
I'm feeling amazing. I made it off a table of all crushers on day 1. Everyone had like 4 million plus earnings. This is amazing. I've never seen anything as cool as this. Obviously they have to close it for security reasons, but if they could leave this open for the entire thing, that'd be world class, yeah.
And no joke, the very first hand on the live stream, we pick up the bullets in Monte Carlo, pocket aces on the featured table under the bright lights. And we got James Hardigan and Joe Stapleton, the legends, commentating. How can it get any better?
Wolfgang aces. Carrera's gonna get banged.
Unfortunately, it folds around to the big blind, who has an atrocious starting hand. He folds, and even though we pick up the aces, can't make any money from them. Next one's pretty interesting. Under the gun raises up to 3K. We see a flat from the +2 with a very strong hand, and I obviously have to come in for a 3-bet. I make it 11K to go from the button.
11K, the re-raise from Wolfgang.
That gets rid of ace deuce of diamonds. Will the +2 decide to 4-bet? Nope, he just puts in the call. Heads up to the flop we go, which comes 7 deuce deuce. When he checks it over to myself, I decide to go for a 25% down bet, and the opponent puts in the call. At this point, I'm putting him on a pocket pair, maybe a flush draw, and of course he could have 2 overcards like Jack 10 with the Jack of clubs or King Jack with the King of clubs, something like that. When the turn comes to 5 of diamonds and the opponent checks it over to me once again, I think I have 2 options. Looking at my stack, I have 43K, which is exactly the size of the pot. So if I'm trying to get him off a hand like pocket 3s or pocket 4s, I would have to jam all in. The question is, do I think the opponent is gonna fold a hand like that when I still could have hands like ace king and king queen of clubs in my range? I think it's definitely a tricky spot, so I go for another option, which is to bet in between an all-in and a check, and I go for a 13K bet. What this is essentially telling my opponent is that I'm ready to play for stacks. If I'm going small here and he calls, I'm obviously going to put it in on the river, and he's going to be pot committed and have to put it in. Looking at his exact holding, I think he has an easy fold, which he decides to do, and we are taking down the first 2 hands of the live stream. One of the cool benefits of being on the live stream is all the exposure that it gets you, and you can see that PokerStars and EPT are giving a nice shout out to myself here. And for those of you that don't know, check out that fun fact down there. I have the most watched video on YouTube for poker. It's not 120 million, I appreciate that, you guys trying to embellish it a little bit, but I think it's around 106 million at the time I'm doing this audio. Back into the hands, we find ourselves in an interesting spot with pocket 6s. I raised them up to 3.5K from the cutoff, and the opponent in the big blind ripped it all in. We're gonna play this as if you're in my shoes and see what you guys would do in this spot. I almost just tried to pronounce his last name, but in the efforts of not butchering it and embarrassing myself and him, we're just gonna call him the opponent in this hand. So I raise up pocket 6s, we get jammed on for 26.5K.
I mean, he could get a fold from 6s here. Then again, he might not.
6s is a call here for sure.
It's kind of a tough spot, but at the end of the day, I decide to listen to the announcers and put in the call. You can see that my opponent shoved it in kinda light, and I'm being nice by saying kinda light. That is an interesting shove to say the least. 8-4 of hearts, and we are a 2/3 favorite here to take down this hand and get rid of another player. The flop's not so great. It gives him some outs. Any queen, any 8, any 7, and he has some backdoor heart ideas as well. The turn comes clean though. It's the ace of clubs. Little table talk from myself.
3-1 favorite here.
Yes, so nicely.
Three of clubs.
You know me, Nick, I'm not a fan of asking for outs when you're ahead.
I know you're not.
And the opponent goes from a 25% chance to 100 on a Queen of Hearts river, and he's gonna find the double up. I guess sometimes it's rather to be lucky than good.
And doubles up through Wolfgang.
When I win, it's good for poker because then 18-year-olds start playing. That's really bad for poker. You want me to win.
If you guys clicked on this vlog to see some street poker, this hand might tickle your fancy. The +1 raises it up to 4K and I find myself in the big blind. I'm not the most advanced tournament player of all time, but what I do know is that you're definitely supposed to be calling super wide out of the big blind. This might be a little bit too wide, but don't tell me that. I put in the call and we flop ourselves queen high on a king 4 deuce board with 2 hearts. I check it over to my opponent and he goes for a 3.5K bet. Now logic would say just fold your cards, Wolfgang. There's a king out there which connects more with his +1 opening range than your big blind defense. However, there is a deuce and a 4 out there, and I think I could have deuce 4 suited, I could have 5-4 suited, 6-4 suited, and if he has a hand like ace queen or queen 10 or ace jack, if I call once on the flop, I'll get a lot of information what he does on the turn. So I decided to get a little sticky here with my nothing and put in the call, and the turn comes the ace of hearts. Definitely not a great card because now his ace jack and ace queen improves to top pair. However, having the 5 of hearts in my hand is important to note. Surprisingly, the action goes check check on the turn, which brings in the 6 of spades on the river. I think if he had an ace or a king in his hand, he probably would go for a very small bet on the turn and then proceed accordingly if I decided to raise, representing a flush or a set. But when he checks back on the turn, it kind of gives me a little bit of rope to go for a bet. For instance, if he has a hand like pocket 7s, pocket 5s, pocket 3s, pocket 10s, I could get those off with a nice size bet here representing a king, an ace, a flush, or 2 pair. So I decide that I'm going to turn my queen high into a bluff. Little do I know that he has just 9 high, but my $7,500 bet gets the job done, and I do think I would get a lot of those pocket pairs to fold. So at the end of the day, I like my bet. Right, let's improve slightly here with ace queen offsuit from the cutoff. I'm looking to debunk all the myths about this being called the parking lot hand. For one, there isn't a parking lot outside of this casino, but for 2, I'm just not trying to get sent to the rails this early on day 2. We get a defend out of the big blind. It's our old foe who doubled up through us a few hands prior. Flop comes pretty great for my hand. Ace king 8 with 2 clubs. Top pair with the queen kicker seems pretty great, so when he checks it over to me, I go for a 6K bet, and the action's back over to him.
Have we figured out what his card protector is?
I think it's a Pokemon.
Okay.
I'm not an expert in this particular field, Griffin. It's more your thing.
I mean, if I get a nice little close-up, I'd probably be able to tell you which Pokemon.
He folds his 10-9 offsuit with pretty much no backdoor ideas, and we are taking down another hand on this live stream. Raising it up from under the gun with king 10 of clubs now, I make it 4K to go, and we get a call from just the hijack. On a 9-7-5 board with 1 club, I think I want to do a lot of checking. The opponent is more likely to have hands like pocket 5s and 7-5 suited. I'm probably not going to have both of those hands from under the gun, although pocket 5s I might have at a small frequency. After I check it over to her, she checks behind, bringing in the 7 of clubs on the turn. It's a nice card because it gives me a lot more outs if I'm behind a pair. However, I think she's going to have more 7x in her range, so I think the best play is to still check it over to herself. For instance, if I bet out here small and then I get raised, it just puts me in a tough spot. Surprisingly, she checks behind for a second time, so at this point I think I can get her off some ace highs and also some small pocket pairs like 3s and deuces if she decided to call that pre-flop. The river comes the 4 of diamonds, and I do in fact decide to go for a bluff here. I bet 13K. This bet is just designed to get her to fold hands that are slightly better than my king high, so ace high and small pocket pairs. As you can see, she does in fact have pocket 3s, and we get it through. She folds her cards, so a great play by me there, getting her to fold the best hand, and we're going to pick up 12.5K in profit in that hand alone. Mustafa Kanit moves to my direct right, so we got some crushers on my right. Mustafa Kanit, we got Zero's Poker over there, and I'm loving my seat draw being in position on both of them. I'm in the +1 and I make kind of a light open here with King Jack offsuit. It's not the best hand because when I get 3-bet, I'm put in a tough spot, which is exactly what happens from my Brazilian friend here from the hijack. He makes it 12,000 to go. Folds back around to me and I'm in a tough spot. +1, I should have a lot of strong cards in my range, so when he's 3-betting my open, it kind of means he has a better hand than me most of the time. So I make a disciplined laydown, and are we correct? Yes, he had ace jack. He had me out pipped by 1, but I think it would have been an uphill battle to win that hand post flop. Right, remember what I just said about +1 ranges being strong? Well, we see an open from Gutierrez from the +1 to 4K, and I find myself in the hijack with ace king offsuit. I think ace king offsuit is more often a 3-bet than a call, but I think it could be good to mix in some calls as well. You want to protect the top end of your range. For instance, if the board comes ace jack 3 and you're only calling with pocket pairs and middling suited connectors, well then you can't have a lot of aces in your range and opponents can play accordingly. So I decide to call here, 1 being I'm trying to mix it up, and 2, Gutierrez is raising from the +1, so he probably has somewhat of a decent hand. The big blind comes in as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop, which is a big ol' whiff for Wolfgang here, 8-4-3 with 2 clubs. Gutierrez goes for a $5,000 bet into 2 opponents, which seems pretty strong, so I fold my ace high. We can see we were up against pocket 3s and ace 9 suited, pocket 3s flopping bottom set. It's possible that I would have got him to fold pre-flop if I come in for the 3-bet, but who knows, we could have played a big pot if he decided to call pre, and then I would have gone for a down bet on the flop. He would have check raised or just called, and so I would have lost more chips. 3 hours have gone by in real time. We're down to 259 players left in the field, which started at 1,208 runners. They move me to the second feature table, which is out on the main floor, and we immediately find ourselves in an interesting spot with pocket aces.
And looks like Rabets has called. Wolfgang tabling aces. Rabets with kings.
Wow.
What a dream spot for us. We have to find the double up here if we want to make it to day 3. And look at that, a pretty clean flop for us, 8-8-5. Turn comes a 4 of spades. He's drawing to just 2 outs, or around 4% chance, which bricks off. The 6 of spades seals his fate. He's not eliminated.
Aces hold. That is a double up for Wolfgang Poker.
We're back up to 37 big blinds, which is more than healthy. We find ourselves with a premium ace king offsuit from the small blind. The hijack opens it up to 5.5K, and out of the small blind, I want to go for kind of a large sizing. I decided that an almost 4x raise is in order. I 3-bet him to 19,000. After a little bit of thought, the opponent in the hijack decides he wants to play in position against me here, puts in the call, and a 43K pot is brewing. This one might be massive. King Queen 6 settles a lot of my fears. If he has a hand like jacks or 10s, we just outflopped him. Having this board absolutely crushed, I decided to go for a very small bet of 10K into the 40K pot. I like this bet because I don't think he can fold a lot of his pocket pairs for just 10K, and also if he has a worse king he can't fold, any queen jack, queen 10 suited he can't fold. The villain likes it as well. He puts in the call and the queen of diamonds peels off on the turn. Can't say I love this card. I think it interacts a lot more with his range than mine, so I think pot controlling here and starting with a check out of position is the right move. The opponent, though, does not have the same ideas. After seeing me slow down, he takes the initiative and fires out for 15K. Obviously, I'm not folding to just 1 bet, but this 15K bet is definitely alarming because it's setting up a river jam. If I call here, it puts me in a tough spot because I'm pretty much just gonna have to go with it no matter what comes on the river. Having the king of diamonds is interesting as well because it blocks a lot of his flush draws like king 10 of diamonds, king jack of diamonds, which is all just nerdy talk in me saying he's gonna have a lot more value than bluffs here. However, I ultimately decide to put in the call, and the 6 of spades peels off on the river, and I love this card. The reason I love this card is because it pairs the board for a second time. If I was behind to a queen, well, that didn't change anything, and given the fact it's not a diamond, a very small percentage of his bluffs don't get there as well. Still, I think the only play is for me to check in flow over to the villain who decided to bet the turn and see what he does on the river. If he wanted to go all in, it would represent all of my stack, which would be around a half pot size bet, so I wouldn't blame him for putting the money in the middle. At the end of the day though, he does check behind, which is kind of music to my ears, because if he jams in here, he's gonna have a lot of Queen X in his holdings. Ultimately though, when he checks behind, I table my cards. The opponent does not show his, instead he taps the table and mucks, and we are taking down a 93K pot, up to 130K in our stack. The blind level is still the same, 1K, 2.5, 2.5, and this time I have 136K in my stack from the +2 position. Find myself with a premium once again. Ace King of Diamonds, the poker gods, are looking down favorably at old Wolfgang here. They want me to make it to day 3. Gutierrez opens it up to 5K from under the gun. I make a little joke about making his poker vlog. If you guys haven't checked him out already or don't know who he is, he has a very successful poker vlog for pretty much just tournament poker. That was one of the cool things about being in this environment. I was around a lot of tournament crushers, and Gutierrez is pretty much like the Wolfgang or Rampage or Brad Owen of the European poker vlogging scene, specifically for tournaments. So it was awesome to meet him and a lot of these legends out there. Definitely gonna be friends for a while. There's a camera over my left shoulder. I know I'm gonna make the vlog if we play a big one here, so I'm chomping at the bits. Obviously, I have to come in for a 3-bet. I make it 14K, a little bit less than 3x. And unfortunately, Gutierrez, aka Zero's Poker, does not want to put in the call. I'm bummed that I'm not making the vlog, getting a little extra exposure and trying to take down a poker vlogger. But at the same time, chipping up here, can't complain about that. We've chipped up nicely to 58 big blinds. I have 146K in my stack, nearly 5 starting stacks of 5.3K euros. So I'm feeling pretty good. I'm in the small blind with Ace-4 of diamonds. Mustafa Kanid, who's a tournament crusher, is on my right, and he opens the button, and I decide to put in the call. The big blind calls as well, so we're going 3 ways to the flop with 17.5K in the middle, which comes pretty great for me. Queen 4 deuce with 2 diamonds. I have second pair, I have an overcard and a nut flush draw. The action checks over to Mustafa. He decides to go for a 1/3 pot size bet of 5.5K, and the action's on me. I think I have 2 options here. One is definitely the more conservative route of just putting in the call and playing out of position on turn and river. However, I could also put pressure on Mustafa and go for a check raise and try to outplay a tournament crusher. That sentence alone doesn't sound too great, but let's think about his entire range. When he opens the button, he's gonna have hands like Jack 10 and Jack 9, Ace King, Ace Jack, Ace 10. I'm just trying to prove a point that he's gonna have a lot of air, and if I raise it up right here, right now, he's gonna fold a lot of hands that have a good bit amount of equity, and that's what I decided to do. We came to play. I want to make day 3, but I also want to have a lot of chips and try to make a deep run and final table this baby. So I decided to get aggressive here and check raise him to 14K. Obviously the big blind can't do much here unless he has a set or 2 pair. He does not, he folds his cards. Actions back over to Mustafa. Now if he has top pair, he has a pretty easy call. Everything else though is gonna be in a tough spot. Even pocket 10s or pocket 9s might just have to fold right here, right now. But Mustafa is a great player. I think he could float me here, pick up some live reads, all that good stuff. He doesn't only have to have top pair or something better. He decides to put in the call, and we are off to the turn in a 45K pot, which comes the king of spades. After getting called on the flop, that's not the turn card we were hoping for. I really wanted to see an ace, a 4, or a diamond. Still, I think I have to continue betting here and telling the story of a good hand. I think at this point, unless he has a hand like king queen, he probably just has to fold any of his 1 pair holdings. With 45K in the middle, I go for a 19K bet, and Mustafa is in the tank. At this point I'm thinking, please fold, please fold. If I can get a hand like 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, or jacks to fold, this would be a massive win. If he puts in the call, well, we could still hit some of our outs on the river, and if we don't, I'm gonna be in an interesting spot where I could empty the tank and put my tournament life on the line. But before any of that happens, Mustafa decides to come out of his slumber there and rip it all in, his entire stack, Luckily I have him covered, but it's still a big shove here of 67K, and now I'm in a gross spot. Obviously we could run the math on this, and I think it's pretty close. It might be leaning a little bit more towards a fold than a call. At this point of the tournament, 131K is in the middle, which is definitely worth a lot, so I have to factor that in as well. If I call and I'm wrong, well, my chip stack will be decimated, but I won't be out. So ultimately, I say something right before putting in the call, which is exactly how I feel in the moment.
I want that first. I want €1,000,000 because that's $1,070,000 American dollars. Okay, I got outs.
So looking at around a 20% chance the river card comes, a brick. Our dreams are crushed of having an over 200K stack. Mustafa Khanid is gonna double up, and yeah, he's a funny guy. You've seen him on some featured tables. The guy likes to joke and definitely gives me a needle to go along with it.
Bro, you played that hand so bad.
We are decimated. We're down to 27.5K in my stack, but having around 7 big blinds, we're going to be pretty handcuffed. Mustafa, of course, he's in the small blind and shoves his entire stack all in. He has me covered. I look down at one card, followed by the next. It's Ace King of Clubs. What a dream. And we put in the call. When the cards are on their backs, we see we're up against Queen Jack of Spades. So a great spot for me here to find a double up.
Wait, put the backpack on. Backpack. I don't have a backpack. Give me yours.
Oh! A chip and a chair, a dream, and Wolfgang spikes the king on the river. Mustafa, bring a backpack next time, because if you had one, that card was surely not coming. But because you didn't have the backpack, we spiked the river, get the double up, and of course, Mustafa is getting a bang sticker. He's not omitted from that. Let's place it right on his chest, and he puts it on his forehead. Look at that. That's a clip we rolled in the intro, but I thought it was iconic. Mustafa Khanid with a bang sticker on his forehead. I posted that on my Instagram and got so many replies. Just a surreal experience from trying to bluff it off into Mustafa and getting called by top set to now getting him back in basically a flip situation, but hitting it on the river. My heart was pumping out of my chest. With 64K in our stack, we find ourselves in the big blind with 4-5 of spades. It is an under the gun raise, the small blind calls, and I call as well. The flop comes 6-5-4 with 2 diamonds. Bang, we flop 2 pair. Obviously, I have to check it over in flow to the pre-flop raiser. That's what I do when she decides to check behind. The turn comes with 3 of hearts and the small blind checks. I think I make a mistake here by checking it again. I think I want to go for a half pot size bet, get some value versus 2 diamonds and some 1 pair type of hands. But when I check, the opponent on my left checks behind, bringing in the river, which comes the ace of clubs. When the small blind checks again, I think now is the best time to get some value. I bet small for 8K, just targeting any ace from the player on my left. Also maybe some top pair type of hands. Just a lot of stuff can call me for a very small 8K bet. Sure enough, the pre-flop raiser does call. We turn over our cards and take down this hand. Let's go. All right, up to 94K in my stack. This next hand, we find an open to 8K from one opponent, and then another opponent decides they want to call, putting in the 8K as well. Action's on me. I'm in the button. What do I look down at? Pocket kings. What a dream situation. There's already 26K in the middle. And of course I have to go for a raise. Normally I'd go 3x plus 1x. So what does that mean? Around 32K. But I want to go a little bit less because it's tournament poker. Usually you size down just a tad. I decide that 30K is the right price. Now if we get the original raiser to fold, that usually means we're gonna get the caller as well. We get the original raiser to fold and the action's over to Zero's Poker, who doesn't wanna let me in the poker vlog fold his cards. We're taking down 56K worth of chips, but it would have been nice to get action there with my pocket kings and maybe find a double up. Shortly after that hand, we get some amazing news. We're down to 175 players, which means the bubble has burst. We have cashed in our first ever EPT main event for 8,700 euros. So locking up a profit is massive for the bankroll, for the mental game, and also it'll be pretty cool to check Hen and Mob and see that I have at least cashed in EPT Monte Carlo. But am I satisfied with 8,700 euros? Sure, but do I want more? Absolutely. We're headed to day 3 with 122K in the bag. There were no other interesting hands to go over. So yeah, we have grinded around 20 hours of poker to get to this point. Day 2, we were seated with a bunch of crushers, Zeros Poker, a fellow poker vlogger, and we also had Mustafa Kanit on our right, who was a blast to play with, and definitely made all the Instagram stories that much better. It was great to get him back with that Ace King of Clubs hand versus his Queen Jack and put the bang sticker on him. But all I can think about is 30 big blinds heading into day 3. Who would have thought? I don't even study tournament poker and I made it to day 3, so now I have to capitalize on this opportunity. If we can get into the 90s and the 80s worth of people left, the money is going to start to get enormous. First place being €1 million, that would be life-changing money for anybody. All I want to do is represent poker at the best level that I can. Making poker fun again has been my motto this entire tournament. So when day 3 and day 4 come around on your newsfeed in a few days from now, you guys are going to want to click on that. Show me some support by liking this video, leaving a comment down below what you thought of my tournament play and what you're looking forward to in the next 2 days. There's a few other videos on your screen right now. Good luck on the felt, you guys, and I'll catch you in a few days. Peace.